Great, Lynn, thanks for joining us. I just want to take the opportunity of finding out a little bit more about Lynn Kristafor the person, and also about the work that you do, transformational learning. It's an interesting title, and there's many definitions out there.
Check it past, yeah. Okay, the background, I would say, is a lifelong inquiry to create and to find out what it is that makes life work. And primarily, I'd actually say that this inquiry started in nappies. I have a memory of myself sitting on the floor with a puffy bottom, and I remember watching the world and seeing how chaotic it was and how unhappy people were, and I was very confused about that. It felt like there'd been a terrible mistake, and that there was another way, and that was what I had to do, is I had to bring that other way in. So in the background of everything that was going on, there was always this question of what the other way was. And within that inquiry of what is the other way, so many lines of pursuit went in. I've always been very interested in the stories of different cultures and how they operated. The question of what is the possible human and how is it possible to get there. My earlier inquiry, actually, and after school I started looking at how the body worked, and went in and did occupational therapy, and had an honor of being able to dissect a body and understand how the body is put together with the anatomy and physiology and biochemistry, and just woke up in awe of this magnificent spaceship that we drive. And in part of the inquiry there was a lot of interest around the physical operating, and then the non-physical operating that was present. So the nutritional factor, spending time really understanding, meeting Leslie Kent and exploring different kinds of food and how it impacts the body at a biochemical level, how it increases energy or diminishes energy. And I got involved in the motivation industry in the 80s, and that was quite exciting. I felt quite excited about the opportunity to open up an inquiry, and ran away from it, in fact, at the end of the day, because in aspects of it I felt were too rah-rah pom-pom, and didn't really get to the point of being able to help if somebody was in a place of chaos and grey fuzz. And so the inquiry is being a long one, and right now I have an opportunity to talk to people one-on-one as well as in a group context, where based on that person's point of traction or their present inquiry, we open up specific questions around that. There is a framework that I use. I call my business the field. It starts in two places. It's, you know, the Rumi quote, "Out beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field." And that just has always been such a shimmer in my cells, in the sense of the truth of it.
So throughout all this time of different studies that you've done, there's been a slow development of the concept of a process.
Yes, there's been a development. I've constantly been looking at what really works, what's really effective. And one of the biggest operating play was the understanding of the 0-point field. And found it quite quirky that our Rumi voice, although in the 12th century, comes up with a line, and our current physicist will call the space between the positive and negative in an atom the 0-point field, which contains no time and space. And I see it as the animating principle around every cell and in every atom, where there's a life energy or a life force energy that contains no time and space, that is in every single person. So it was from that premise that I started looking and putting a process together where people could, from a personal experiential point of view, be able to see and experience themselves as the inner being and as the watcher. And I think the first play that really, really got me was, what are we doing in this body? And what is each person doing in their body and in their lives? And the question around that was very much around their purpose. And I understood a language to describe each person's 0-point field, holding the components of body, mind, spirit, and creating language so that the logic could get it.
So what type of people come to you?
Wonderful question. I find the people that are called into this type of an inquiry are being called in a very deep personal level, either with a relationship crisis, a role in the world question, or a question of life and death, or wanting to be in this body, or go, Scotty, beam me up, this is a crazy world, I can't do this. And they're at a place of deep question and sincere inquiry. And I really have always appreciated that the results need to speak for themselves. So people that come through into the inquiry have been called or have been connected to it by knowing somebody and actually watching them change and become less chaotic and more clear and stiller and more peaceful and clearer, and recognize that as something that held potential.
You'd say there's certain classifications of people that come to you. Are there kind of like standard issues that people normally come to you with?
Those three, I think, where life or the soul of the being is really, really calling, is around relating to others, or a feeling of separate or isolation. Could play out in different places in different ways. Some people, sometimes I see quite an extreme where people are completely isolated. They don't really go out or see people, and they find it very hard to connect with the world. So extreme cases, as well as places where they've been thrown into a situation because of a relationship crisis, a difficulty, or there've been context to those relating things.
I've read in your material actually online. You talk about role in the world. What do you mean by that? Can you just go into that a bit more detail?
Role in the world would be, I do remember my standard 2 teacher telling us that life is a verb, in the sense that it's an active experience. And role in the world would be about a person's active experience, or the work in a sense of what people are actually doing. And so role in the world would be, what is your real job description? It's not necessarily where you earn money, which a lot of people decide is what their job is. Role in the world is any place where you are and what it is that you're doing. And at the end of the day, your true role in the world is something that will make you very happy. And knowing what that is deeply satisfying, because no matter where you are, if you're buying bread and milk, you're doing it. Or if you're chatting to a friend, or you're doing a presentation to a board, or to a group of people outside of a picnic table, there's a role that you're playing, or an expression that you're busy with.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be so much confusion in the world around object referral, as Deepak Chopra talks about it, or you define yourself because of your job, by virtue of your job, or by virtue of the wealth that you have. But obviously you're talking about your real role in the world.
If our lives are about experiencing joy, and you starting to understand your true action in context to joy, or something that would really bring you a lot of joy, and you hold that as a point of reference when you're expressing or you're active in any situation, there's something that happens for you in that clarity, where it becomes easier to be in the situation, as opposed to wondering what the outside is thinking of you, or whether you're appropriate. You're coming from a place of greater clarity and I'd say less ambivalence.
The second point that you mentioned on your site is relationship crisis.
Yeah.
Go into that a bit.
The relationship crisis, you know, I think relationships are very much the fire, and we'd all acknowledge there are times when there's been toss and turn in the night and deep, intense emotions. I think relationships are our deepest work, and Einstein called this the relative field. It's impossible that you're not in relationship at every and any point in time. And it's each person's most important work to really understand how to be at peace with all others and any other at all times. In fact, there's a beautiful player who put the hero's journey concept together, Joseph Campbell. Beautiful voice on our planet. And I see that as a metaphor, the relationship point is very much that hero's journey. The hero itself is called in the place where he feels separate, or there's a challenge that you get called to go and solve that challenge, and it may feel like you're in a dark cave with a dragon spewing fire at you. So relationship really is being able to deal with each of the elements that you're called to and understand what it is that you personally have to resolve and balance within the relationship dynamic.
And the third point that you talked about was life and death. Is that quite a common challenge?
Yeah,
that people
I
face?
think the point of what am I doing in this body? What is life about? That what am I doing here? Especially when things persistently become quite hard, or there's an ambivalence or a confusion around it. And I think it's such an important connection for people to have, or to answer that point of what am I doing, and I would lead it into what is my purpose in this body, in this life, and knowing that and holding that as a reference for every experience is really helpful.
In terms of why people come to you, we've just looked at three categories, three big categories here. What would you say is the common denominator in most of these things in terms of what people are not doing? And what is it that you kind of work with them to fix?
Such a good question. I'd wonder if we could just re-look at that question and perhaps define it slightly differently, where it's not in terms of what someone's not doing. It may be, I understand that free will is the most important element on our planet, and each person is going to choose freely what it is that they are going to do at any point in time, whether or not you've told them a lot of info. So the invitation, in fact, is to invite people into core truths that they recognize. And when you recognize something, your whole body relaxes. And there's a sense of relief and that washes over you in the recognition of that truth. So when you know something, you've recognized it at a cellular level where there's no resistance to that. And then applying that truth as you recognize it in different scenarios. So to come back to how I'd answer the question of what people individually would be working with is, people are ready to recognize individual circumstances and truths at their own pace, based on where they are and what their experiences have been. And so the work really is about each person's personal pace of being able to recognize what is true for them, what allows their bodies to relax in a deep play. I really know truth is a point of recognition for each person. And working within that, as each situation comes in, I like to work with people once a week. So we'll bring a recognition into play. We'll understand a concept, and then we'll meet where they are in their personal point of truth and recognition. And then they go out and know for the week. And as we wrap that session up, we'll identify where they're going to watch so they can recognize if that's true for them or not in different contexts and scenarios that play out in their day for that week. So they're literally being able to walk through their day and experience those truths relative to who they are and what their life calls them. And so the actual experience itself is what consistently creates different points of recognition. And as the body recognizes those things, the clarity allows the body to deeply start becoming clearer and more centered and more relaxed.
Well, you talked a bit about the process that you're doing. What do you expect of people? What's their side of the bargain when people come and work with you?
Oh, it's very simple. A sincere inquiry. I really invite people to put a skeptical hat on, because it needs to be their own recognition of truth, not my truth that I give them. So for your own sustainable shift, you really, in your own world, in each event, you need to recognize something personally and deeply that is true for you. Because in that recognition moment, everything can change for you personally, and it's incredibly important that people recognize. So have an inquiry and have an intent to find that personal recognition. So what I'd be doing is supporting people on how to recognize that, in essence. And that's why I go, a sincere inquiry is really important. And a good, healthy dose of skepticism is also fabulous. We highly recommend that.
But do you give them homework?
Oh, there's every moment of every day. There is a process of building awareness and recognition. So for me, truth is a point of recognition. So I'd say we switch on the watcher, and we switch on the personal sense of awareness of what the body is saying, which chakras are switching on. So there's a large amount of self-awareness that we switch on, awareness of the different systems in the body. I know the body is the most refined GPS system available on the planet, and a GPS system that talks in every possible way based on where the consciousness is playing.
And do you get many situations where people don't do the work, clients don't do it, or is it?
Yeah, you could say there was a radio station of reality or awareness that people are operating on. And sometimes that act of leaning over and shifting the radio dial into something that serves you. So very frequently, if people, I think, instinctively know that when they make certain changes, there are many things in their lives that will shift. Sometimes they're resistant to addressing or having certain things shift, so there's a little inertia around moving certain things because they'll have to confront them. Whether it's a relationship that's not quite there, or whether it's a working environment that's not quite there, or whether it's a personal sense of responsibility for your health or your habits, or whether you listen to yourself, or you run enough, or you move your body enough, or layers of stuff. Sometimes we don't want to take responsibility, we want to hang loose. So I really do know that you can't heal a wound with the same energy that created a wound. So it's not about me to judge another, other than invite them to experience something that would bring an outcome that makes life very, very fulfilling. At the end of the day, we're going for joy. We're going for a place of awareness and freedom, where you're no longer being run by what people say or whether you're looking okay. So you're no longer being run by what the outside is saying, but you become clearer and present in what it is that you're potentially bringing each event and each situation. And you're not even aware of what you're bringing, other than it flows from you.
Can we talk a little bit about depression, non-clinical depression? I'd imagine that's something that you deal with quite often.
Yeah. I heard an interesting definition for depression that resonated, and it was defined as a place where people feel out of control. And I think in the world that we've created, there's so many rules and expectations, and you should, and you must, and layers that are running people, is that they're so busy being run by wondering whether it's appropriate or not appropriate that they've lost touch with themselves, and they don't feel they're able to do that, or they may be punished if they did bring their own selves into the situation. And I think that people have got frozen around where they are and who they are. And I think in that whole place of confusion, I call it the grey fuzz. In all the grey fuzz, people feel quite out of control, and it gets overwhelming. And I think that there are different layers of life experience where over time more and more events may have happened to them where they haven't had a say, or they haven't chosen to have a say. And it just gets to a particular point in time where the whole minefield or grey fuzz field is just so intense that it all gets it just calls that person really loudly, because your body is not going to do very well while you're operating on a constantly changing field that doesn't have anything to stand on. And I think life calls you. Your relationships will call you, or your sense of discomfort at work will call you. More than anything, I think it's the stress of it.
So is there a kind of a common antidote that you prescribe for this? Is there something that all these people are doing or not doing that's a contributing factor?
I'd say honouring your life, honouring yourself, being present and aware. A lot of people have an experience of being quite detached or from themselves and from people in front of them. So the biggest play would be the play of separate. And
agreements, I read on your Facebook site you were talking about agreements, keeping agreements. That plays a large role?
Well, it's connected to a person recognizing a truth. If you've recognized a truth or something that's important to you, and you keep an agreement to bring it into action, you're going to be flooding energy into your body and becoming more alive as you living that truth. If you recognize that truth and you don't keep an agreement with yourself in that recognition, you're going to create stress in that moment. So in the play of agreements, I think the first agreement would start in your personal recognition of what's true and valuable to you, and bringing that into experience. And simultaneously, I would invite the idea of building trust in the world by grounding communication with agreements that connect to time and place. And when you connect with others, you keep agreements with them, so you're clear with where you are and when it's going to happen and where it's going to happen, and there's less confusion, and as a result less stress in the whole interaction.